Welcome back everyone to another deck profile featured on Master Duel. I am a bit behind, but I finally got some replays to start throwing out more videos soon. Today I'm covering one of my most hated decks, Domain Monarchs. Now as much as I dislike this deck because I definitely prefer an extra deck, it was interesting to try out for the first time, and it isn't too expensive of a deck since you don't need an extra deck. Monarchs are the first solo gate story featured in Master Duel, so you do get a structure with some things. The real good cards however come from their secret pack, as you might have guessed, Supernatural Elements. Aside from that pack, everything else is either a cheap craft or an SR from the Master Pack, which is also recommended to craft, which is mainly Vanities and Majesty's Fiend. In total, you are looking at 7 to 8 URs needed from the pack, 8 to 10 SRs from the pack, and however many copies of Vanities or Majesty's Fiend you want to run. I got lucky with 3 domains off 1000 gems, so I decided to see what I could do with the deck. First things first, this deck is not easy to get rolling with all the time. Its main goal is forming a lockdown board with a tribute summon monster and domain of the Monarchs. This can seem weak, but against certain decks that aren't prepared, this can be a devastating option to go first with. Pantheism of the Monarchs is one of the best consistency cards the deck could have, discarding a Monarch spell or trap to draw 2, but it can also banish itself to search another Monarch spell from the deck as well. More often than not, I found myself discarding this or sending it to the grave with Erebus or Ehther, since having another spell in the hand is not always guaranteed. Since the deck relies on getting specific pieces to perform tribute summons and establish the board, Anchamoufrite is practically mandatory for being a free draw and tribute fodder since it can special summon itself after the draw. Edea and Eidos are the OG starters of the deck though, as the first can summon the other from the deck, who grants another normal summon when it hits the field. The more impressive effect comes from when they hit the grave, as Edea can retrieve banished Pantheisms or other spells, while Eidos can revive Edea for more tribute fodder. Foolish Burial helps set these effects up pretty nicely, along with sending Erebus to the grave, who can discard a spell to bring itself back to the hand, just in case you don't have any Monarchs in hand. Ehther and Erebus are the boss monsters of the deck if it wasn't obvious, Erebus being able to shuffle a card into the deck on summon, with Ehther summoning another Monarch from the deck. The only real targets for this of value are Erebus and Kuraz sometimes, but this is pretty much the main source for an easy OTK. I could not get my hands on a third Erebus, so I decided to swap it out for another 2800 attack Monarch. At first it was the Stalos, then Caius, but after finding out I had no way to handle backrow, Mobius fit the slot well despite me only making use of it in an instant scoop duel. The deck's biggest weakness is going second against a lot of the meta decks, as our best option is the Monarchs Stormforth, which can tribute an opponent's monster. There are a lot of negates decks can put out now, along with hiding their important monsters until later on, such as Eldritch or Tri-Brigade activating Revolt. There is also an obvious lack of tech space, as consistency is too important to cut certain things while maintaining the plays needed to make a good board. In side deck format, things could be better, but for now your best bet is going first and hoping your opponent relies on the extra deck. All in all, this is a pretty easy deck to make and figure out for the most part, especially for any returners to the game. Couple things that are important to know: it is best for you to banish Pantheism to search Tenacity instead of the spell you want yourself. Reason being is that this deck can get into a grind situation with the trap card and Erebus, which banish spells from the grave to summon themselves. Aside from deck thinning, this can really be the key to surviving longer matches, as you can see in the last replay of this video. So here's a quick replay going second like we don't want. I have an interesting hand of Tenacity with no target in hand, and Edea with no double tribute Monarch. Vanity's Fiend can be cool going first, but going second is a concern as my opponent is already established. Still, March of the Monarchs is welcome here, as if my opponent has destruction traps, my monsters will be immune thankfully. The real nightmare to worry about are solemn traps, floodgate trap hole, and other generic traps that don't destroy, but luckily we get a second Stormforth to help us get through. The tribute priority here is definitely Rafflesia, as without domain, Vanities won't be able to get over it, but more importantly it can trigger a floodgate from the deck, making the summon useless. Like I mentioned, this deck does struggle in finding space for tech cards, but if I had to pick one, it would be Twin Twisters to discard dead spells, Pantheisms, or even Erebus since it could come back to the hand. Finding space for maybe 2 is difficult, but I did experiment with only 2 Stormforths and no extra trap like Escalation, so it could help if you want to take this deck all the way. The good thing about facing trap tricks is that once you clear a few of their traps and establish monsters stronger than any they can summon, they struggle to keep up as long as they don't have random traps like IDP, Compulsory, or Torrential Tribute. That example aside, I do want to show off a more ideal scenario for the deck where you do get Domain and a Monarch on board. Eidos and Stormforth could have been better cards like March or Escalation, but it would have been a little greedy of me to wish for that. You have Edea for the tribute fodder and Erebus to set up the grave and rip a card. Return is also amazing as it keeps your hand filled with other Monarchs to summon on following turns for lethal, and as expected, Ehther is the next best thing. It's highly recommended to send Pantheism and the Prime Monarch with both of these Monarchs, as they have the grave effects to use and help out your plays a bit. Prime Monarch is an amazing defensive wall as well as tribute fodder, so setting it up ASAP should be a goal. Like I mentioned, use Pantheism to search Tenacity first, that way you have more fuel in the grave, but only if you have a Monarch to reveal for its cost. Unfortunately, my opponent seems to have never faced Domain at all, so he is throwing Tri-Monsters out like nobody's business with no access to the extra deck. This is what the deck is really all about. There's also something key to do when you have Ehther in hand on your opponent's turn, and that is to summon it by banishing a Monarch spell from the grave. Doing this is probably the best time to summon Kuraz, as it does get its effect on special summon, and not attacking on your opponent's turn is pretty irrelevant. I would save this until you find a good spot to use it though, as they can draw for cards being popped. Anyway, that will be it for me. The last replay is quite long and probably has misplays, but it does show how this deck can exhaust resources of the opponent easily and enter a grind game, so I included it. Make sure to like and subscribe and let me know what you guys think.